Thank you very much, folks, for joining in today. My name is Susie Payne. I was asked by Marion and family to welcome you here today. I'm very grateful and honored by the opportunity. And I'll be introducing some of the presenters today. On behalf of everyone present, we would like to acknowledge that today we are gathered at a place that both the Wisanich and Lekwungen peoples have relationships to. The Wisanich homelands include all of what is now the Saanich Peninsula and many of the surrounding Gulf and San Juan Islands. However, in the 1940s, the people were forced into the small communities of Wauchotlip, Paquatchin, Sayout, and Sycombe. The Lekwungen people were moved from across what is now called Victoria onto the two small villages of Songhees and Esquimalt. The Wisanich name for this region is Tumultlan, a shared place where red ochre medicine was found. This specific location where we're gathered to celebrate Jeremy's life is Kumultlan, which describes a shortcut for traveling across land to see relatives and friends, including the Lekwungen. Before colonization, there wasn't a hard territorial border with a sense of land ownership as we think of it today. This was a well-regarded place of good feelings, where people would meet, gather, hunt, and feast before winter. How fortunate we are to all be here gathered today to celebrate the life of Jeremy Patrick Long. Loving husband, father, grandfather, brother, uncle, nephew, brother-in-law, friend, artist, administrator, and maker of community. Comments made to the McCall's funeral home site offer personal appreciations of Jeremy, and many of the qualities mentioned are repeated, especially kind. Also, gentle, grounded, supportive, dignified, open-minded, open-hearted, with a cheeky sense of humor. These were central aspects of Jeremy's character, abiding. And I would like to add courage and integrity. Jer aspired to be a poet when he was a young man. He wrote poetry, and I'd like to share this poem by Alice Oswald called A Short Story of Falling. It is the story of the falling rain to turn into a leaf and fall again. It is the secret of a summer shower to steal the light and hide it in a flower. And every flower, a tiny tributary that from the ground flows green and momentary, is one of water's wishes. And this tale hangs in a seed head smaller than my thumbnail. If only I, a passerby, could pass as clear as water through a plume of grass to find the sunlight hidden at the tip, turning to seed a kind of lifting rain drip, then I might know how, like water, to balance the weight of hope against the light of patience. water which is so raw, so earthy strong, and lurks in cast iron tanks and leaks along, drawn under gravity towards my tongue, to cool and fill the pipework of this song, which is the story of the falling rain that rises to the light and falls again. And now I'd like to introduce Alexander Long, Jeremy and Marion's oldest son, who'll share with us some stories of Jer's childhood.
Hi, everybody. It is such an unbelievable feeling to walk into this room and see all your faces and give you hugs, and thank you for being here on behalf of our family. So my job is to shed some light on Jer's roots, his early days. And Jeremy Long to us was our pops, our grandpops to our kids, and I'm sure many other things to many people in this room. Jer was born August 18th, 1948 in Manchester, England, to Patrick and Kathleen. He was the middle child, which seems about right if you knew Jer. He shared a really close connection to his sisters, his older sister Diana and our Auntie Phoebe. So that was their family makeup. Jer was born as a bit of an army brat. So in the first 3 years of his life, he bounced around a bit. He was between Jamaica, British Honduras, and Belize, and eventually back to England. His recollection of his years, his early years in those first few years are very vague. But a couple of key memories that he shared with us over the years were falling into a nest of red ants in Belize. And during a time of civil unrest, he spent a couple of nights in the jungle hiding with his mother and sister and their nanny, who he adored. There's more to that story. You can see some of us for that later. In 1956, the family immigrated to North America, landing in Boston, and eventually taking a train ride across Canada and settling in Kerrisdale, also known as Little England. From age 8 onward, Dad grew increasingly thoughtful, observant. He was a serious student. He took himself seriously at times. And he excelled academically, for sure. He had a deep sense of responsibility that emerged for him at an early age. He was a hardworking guy. As a teen and like in his early years, he had multiple paper routes. He had a gig as a drugstore delivery boy. He had a gig as a he repaired appliances at Kerrisdale Appliances. And all this work, he eventually saved up enough money to buy his mother a sewing machine so she could mend and create for the family. That's telling of him. As a child, he loved reading. He could escape into a book. And as a young child, his love of the arts emerged and sort of spawned. And that part of his life was always supported by his mother, Kathleen. Having two parents who were trained in the British Army leads one to become fairly self-sufficient, organized. So whether Jer was packing a suitcase, putting a tent away, drying it out properly first, of course, ironing his shirts, he was definitely, at a young age, modeling self-discipline and routine. And our family can definitely attest to some of those habits and routines that he was really entrenched in. So in Kerrisdale, as part of an immigrant family, Jer found himself often lonely. with no extended relations, not a lot of like connection to family, except for the occasional reference to the Irish connection on his father's side. So this can be attributed to any sort of, romantic, poetic tendencies, or the fighting Irish temperament. Dad's circle of friends reflected the mix of his personality. Serious, thoughtful, but with a touch of mischief and challenging behavior at times. His sisters tell a story of some potential involvement in a fire in a lumber yard. Bit of a mystery, really. Despite Dad's, somewhat kinetic challenges at times, he was involved in sport. And so in high school, Jerry played cricket. And in the first match of his season, Jerry took a ball square to the nose, leaking, bleeding profusely, but demanded to return to the game. A lot of willpower, a lot of determination in that man. This history repeated itself when Jer coached Little League as well. He also got smashed in the face in doing that. And he also played high school football. Jerry was a tight end, representing the McGee Lions. Again, a slew of injuries in that season. His late teen years, again, his artistic side, his creativity was growing. It was really emerging. And so he had a band in high school called Us, which never quite made it off the ground, but again, valiant effort. A few steps in writing poetry, some creativity, but Jerry was a different guy in high school. He loved, in the summer, Jerry would head off with his friends. He would get dropped off in the Fraser Valley somewhere or at the Endowment Lands in UBC and spend like 2 or 3 days camping with his buddies. It was one of his favorite things when he was a teen. Patrick would drop them off and leave them to their own devices and come and pick them up a few days later. The lunch counter at Woolworths was one of Dad's favorite places. He didn't go hungry. And, really, the other seeds planted in his formative years, which Tristan will speak to this a little more later, but our pops grew up as the only son of a man who was very much an example of what masculinity was in his generation. Often expressing himself in one of two ways: anger, maybe some joy. But for our dad, that was a big part of his formative years, was stepping up to be the man of the house at times. He was assigned only blue jobs in his house, so he would be outside in the garden, fixing the fence, pruning the roses, mowing the lawn, but never in the kitchen or cleaning or any of those things. That was important in their house. What he chose to bring forward early in his life were serious work ethic, commitment, speaking up against any injustices that he saw or witnessed, and taking a stand for them. And he did all that through action and always with integrity. It's one real hallmark of Jer. Being raised in a Catholic faith also sent him on a search. He had this faith that he dabbled in as a kid, but it sent him on a search to always dig, to understand motive, to understand meaning. What is this all about? It's something that persisted throughout his life. These were some of the building blocks of the man that came to be, my father. a good man. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce our uncle, Captain Kevin Monahan.
Wow, what a crowd. I love Jeremy. Excuse me. How could you not love him? This extraordinary man who so deeply affected all our lives. I first met Jeremy at UBC in the Dorothy Somerset studio where he was acting in The Revenger's Tragedy. He was a big bear of a man, dark, full beard, confidently striding across the stage. I was so struck by Jeremy's stage presence, I remember very little of the play itself. After my father died suddenly, I found it difficult living alone. Jeremy rescued me. A vacancy had appeared in the communal house known as the House on U Street in Kitsilano. I applied to move in, I was accepted, and my life changed. Forever, it changed. Jeremy and his sister Phoebe, and Francis Garner, Ed Astley, Victor Young, all welcomed me with overwhelming enthusiasm. The house on U Street was central to the lives of more than those who lived there. It was a social center. It was a place of refuge. I think we were all refugees in one way or another at the time. In the house, I found a barely contained but comfortable chaos. Its smoke-filled rooms reflected the crazy, disordered nature of the times. The house, which had only one bathroom, rented for $175 a month. That winter, its population expanded temporarily to 10 residents. So each of us paid only $17.50 for rent. But that meant there were times when the bathroom lineup was so long that some of us would have to use the washroom at the local gas station. From my first days there, Jeremy's cloak of friendship supported me through a challenging time. He became my big brother. And he remained so for the rest of my life. Somehow, Jeremy and Ed Astley managed to get jobs at the Molson's Brewery on Burrard Street. It turned out they were permitted to drink as much beer as they wanted. As you might imagine, the job didn't last very long. They grew tired of beer and quit. One day, the telephone was cut off. It turned out that the phone bill had gone astray in Eddie's downstairs bedroom, and it took days to find it and pay it. After I moved to Lasqueti Island, Jeremy visited me frequently, and I visited him at U Street or wherever he happened to be. In the early years of Tamanous, his brilliance and perceptiveness were foundational. Yet according to Jeremy, it was only due to the efforts of his fellow members that Tamanous enjoyed its great success. He didn't care how he was seen by others. When he received a Queen's Jubilee, Silver Jubilee medal, he drove to his mother's apartment and dropped it through the mail slot without going in. Jeremy wove the strands of his life into his art. His play, co-written with John Gray, Salty Tears on a Hangnail Face, was the story of Quixote, the U Street cat, and the humans who populated the house. One summer, he stayed in my tiny cabin high on a rock bluff on Lasqueti Island, where he wrote 84 Acres, a political drama about overdevelopment in the Gulf Islands, featuring my two Muscovy ducks, Jemima and Jim Dandy. Jeremy was always the adult in the room. He combined stability with gentle wisdom, plain talk, a wry sense of humor, and above all, a gentle sense of play. When he first met Nancy, the love of my life, he told me, "Kevin, she's a good woman. She will push you far." And it's true. When Tamanous Theatre came to Lasqueti Island, Jeremy introduced me to Marion. And when they were planning their wedding, Jeremy asked Nettie Wild, Don Canrad, and myself to all be his best people. This was highly unconventional, especially with Nettie being appointed as one of the best people. So I recall I bought a new suit. That's the only suit I think I ever bought. And Nettie wore a tuxedo. But none of us cared. Above all, Jeremy had the kindest of souls, a quality that's in too short supply in this world. He passed kindness on to his children, and he expressed it and extended it to everyone, as if it was a commodity that only increased by giving. I miss Jeremy every day. I can think of no better tribute than to sing a song from Salty Tears on a Hangnail Face. You will excuse me. This is all from memory. And it goes like this. Landlord came around today. He's going to raise the rent. We've been stoned for 16 weeks. Our money's all been spent. Necessity has raised its ugly head when things was looking fine. Our cupboard's bare. Our goose is cooked for the 52nd time. Gotta get a job. Gotta get a job. Gonna lose my mind. Job, 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 job. Get a job, 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 job. Landlord, he's got dollar signs wrote right between his eyes. Fingernails are 6 foot long, a monster in disguise. He's got us natives terrified beneath his iron fist. Oh, landlord, please have mercy. Persecutor, please desist. Gotta get a job. Gotta get a job. Gonna slip my wrist. Job, 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 job. Get a job, 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 job. Get a job. I made it. And now, Susie Payne's going to talk to us about Jeremy the artist.
Great job, solo artist. Yeah, well, that sets a high bar. Jeremy and I met through the magic of our mutual love of theater. We worked side by side in our theater company, Tamanus, for several years. Many of the people who were part of that company are here today. I trusted Jer thoroughly, and we undeniably had mutual respect and admiration for each other as creative artists. Ultimately, our paths diverged, and Jeremy moved on to other important work as a superb arts administrator and a rich married life with Marion as they built their family. But the initial bond between Jer and I was so strong that I feel a forever link. Tamanus was built on collaborative ideals. Jeremy threw himself 110% into the company's process, which included hours of production meetings, passionate discussion, and more long hours of rehearsal, and daily physical training. And he only complained once or twice about the contortions. He demonstrated always that giving anything short of your all for your art was out of the question. Speaking of contortions, the company toured our shows throughout BC extensively in rental vans, with the size of the van depending on how we were doing at the box office. Jeremy was often at the wheel because we trusted him, but also possibly because he determined that that was the place that was the farthest removed from the crush of bodies and the personal belongings and the costumes and the props, and it was all in the back of the Chevy van. Jer's focus sharpened towards writing, even as he poured himself into the development of Tamanus. Increasingly, he was nurturing his curiosity about cultural expressions and traditions, and especially those of the First Peoples. It was a major accomplishment for Jer, I think, to develop his individual vision while committing himself wholeheartedly to collective creation. The first play that Tamanous produced that credited Jer as a playwright was a harrowing but sympathetic investigation of the genius and chaotic life of the Russian ballet dancer Vaslav Nijinsky. It was called The Final Performance of Vaslav Nijinsky's San Moritz Dorf 1919. I was there. It was presented at the Vancouver Art Gallery, the old location on Georgia Street, and then later at the Vancouver East Cultural Centre and on tour as far as Toronto. It was adapted as a film by company member Tom Braidwood titled Inside the Reflection, and ultimately it was published as a standalone text. His next play was Medea, presented at the Vancouver East Cultural Centre, now called The Culch. It was bloody, feminist, and Jer's poetic writing compellingly evoked the Greek myth. Our audiences were enthusiastic, very enthusiastic. We were under full steam. Jer co-wrote the musical Salty Tears, which Kevin mentioned. It was performed at the old Pantages Theatre on Hastings, which had been a vaudeville house. I remember it as being particularly about love in its many forms, romantic, communal, universal, and also about what lasted. Jer sang the title song backed by a chorus. There was the woeful I Don't Remember Mama, which was sung by the lead character, the cat named Quixote, living in a house full of struggling hippies. When the cat died, the young humans grieved but came to realize that Quixote's passing was a natural process and an opportunity to look beyond their daily challenges to something more everlasting. Our audiences continued to build. The next show written by Jer that I was part of was 84 Acres, inspired by Kevin and Nancy on their farm on Lasqueti Island. The lead characters were two Muscovy ducks, and it's a testament to Jer's writing and to our abilities as a company to produce this play, which featured two of the actors in full duck costume. It was a huge success. Huge success. Next, Jeremy directed the musical Liquid Gold. The show was written by Glenn Thompson, with music by Bruce Riddell, lyrics by Tom Braidwood. It was promoted on a Vancouver Island tour in 1978 in a newsletter from what was then Malaspina College as a rollicking tale about fishermen and rum runners on the Sunshine Coast. Set in the rum-running 20s, Liquid Gold is jam-packed with the excitement of an Errol Flynn adventure, the comedy of a Laurel and Hardy routine, and 11 show-stopping musical numbers danced and sung in the honky-tonk ragtime style. And Captain Jer was at the helm. When Jeremy started to take on a bigger role in administrative work, most of us breathed a sigh of relief. He stepped back from the spotlight on stage to enthusiastically address the business of running the company. It was a vocation not everybody aspired to. Go Jer! He continued to write plays for Tamanous, Robin Hood and the Golden Arrow for school audiences and the Vancouver Children's Festival, Some Kind of Savior, presented at the Culch, We Too, Chronicle of the Coal Tyee. And he went on to write a lot of grant applications, public speeches, and reports. And all of it, I know he did with the same courage and integrity. And now, Jeannie Longacre is going to play some musical selections for us, accompanying a beautiful show of visuals featuring Jeremy Long.
Just take that in for a minute. Minigajab, Gakanawia, Kathy Charles Wary, Ndishnakas, Wawashkashe, Nindo Dam, Anishinaabe, Windsowin, Migazi, Bamas, okay. Ramamanjikaning, Georgina Island, Port Hope, Ontario, Ndunjiba, Hutsanich, Ninchagodaya, Huchatlip, Nogomdaya. My name is Kathy Charles Wary, and I am Anishinaabe and English-Irish, and I shared with you my Ojibwe name that my uncle gave me, which translates roughly to eagle soaring high. And I currently live in Saanich at Huachatlip with my dear husband, Andy Paul. I'm so glad to be here with all of you to celebrate the life of Jeremy Long. And I'm especially honored that Jeremy's dear wife and our friend Marion invited me to share a few words about the work that Jeremy did for Indigenous artists and what walking alongside him in that work has meant to me. This is only my perspective, and I hope that nothing I say offends or excludes anyone. But to begin, when Jeremy was a young teenager, he was a golf caddy. Amongst all those jobs that were mentioned earlier, he was a golf caddy at Musqueam Golf Course, where he worked with and became friends with another caddy named Tony from Musqueam. And through that relationship, Jeremy learned about and started to develop an appreciation and understanding of that friend's world and his culture, and a seed was planted. Later, when Jeremy was in his 20s, he worked as a sound man on an NFB project that was focused on Indigenous technologies. And so the crew traveled around and visited many communities, and they spent time with knowledge carriers and artists and elders. And again, through that work, Jeremy took in the significance of what was being shared with them as he sat close and listened. Through that same project, Jeremy met and became friends with Kwagilth artist Chief Tony Hunt at Wawadlidla, the big house next to RBCM. They became friends, and Tony taught him to make his own carving tools that are here. And he coached him through making a mask, which is also here. As part of that relationship, Tony also invited Jeremy and some of the others to a potlatch. And at that time, in the early 70s, not many non-Indigenous folks were welcomed in that way. And Jeremy always treasured that experience and the $5 bill as one of the gifts that he received as a witness that day. Another indication of how he valued that experience. During that same NFB project, some of the crew were traveling by boat near the Coast Salish village of Chumanis on the east coast of Vancouver Island. And around the corner at Kalit Bay, they visited a sea wolf petroglyph that is engraved onto a huge glacial erratic. Standing in the boat, Jeremy did a wax rubbing of the sea wolf onto a piece of canvas. And the impression that he rendered that day from that powerful image has been a part of Jeremy's and his family's world for 50 years. So it's here today too. Our lives are made up of many small stories. And the stories we attend to stay with us, and they carry us, and they make us who we are. The sea wolf rubbing is here with us today because it represents a story that Jeremy attended to. It's been a witness to his long-standing recognition of and belief in Indigenous brilliance. Other treasured mementos related to these stories are here with us. The family's also grateful to Saanich artist Temosung Chaz Elliott for creating a design inspired by the petroglyph, but meant for them to use however they wish for honoring Jeremy. I'm sharing these stories because they are the seeds and origins of Jeremy's personal understanding and commitment to working in support of Indigenous arts. But Jeremy was a humble person who never tried to make himself bigger than others. And during the 14 years that we worked together, he never told me any of these stories. It was only after talking to Marion that I learned. So he didn't use these experiences to aggrandize himself or claim authority or entitlement. The experiences just inspired him quietly in his heart to take action and give back, and he did so with humility. Jeremy was the primary champion behind the 1992 creation of the Aboriginal Arts Development Awards. That grant program was the first public arts funding program launched specifically for Indigenous arts, not only in BC, but in the country. This was 32 years ago when the political climate was very different. Back in those days, Indigenous people still spent a lot of time at tables working to convince the powers that be that our arts and our languages and our cultures mattered. And that after the legislated assaults upon those practices, public support was not just needed, but deserved. In his role at Cultural Services and BC Arts Council, Jeremy stood up for us because he knew it was the right thing to do. Again, he never talked about the fact that he stuck his neck out during those early days. He didn't seek credit for his efforts. He just did it because he was inspired by our people. I first met Jeremy in 1995 when he hired me on a contract to manage the applications that had come in response to that grant program. And it was immediately evident that he was sincerely committed to seeing the program succeed. As part of that, he believed at the very least an Indigenous person needed to be interacting with the applicants. During my 10 weeks of work at Cultural Services, Jeremy and I had many conversations about how the effectiveness and growth of the program could be facilitated. And he genuinely wanted to hear my thoughts and always respected my experience and perspective. And he didn't fight me because he was already convinced. And I mention that because at the time, we were always trying to convince people, and he was different. One of the ideas we talked about was having the program delivered by an Indigenous entity at arm's length from the Arts Council. And again, Jeremy knew this was a good idea, and he was already looking at the then new First Peoples Cultural Council as a possibility. As he worked toward making this happen, I was already doing contract work for that organization as well. So I found myself in the middle of that shift, and there for the birth of a unique and valuable partnership between First Peoples and BC Arts Council. During the many years that we worked alongside each other, we shared a commitment to building a meaningful organizational relationship and seeing the grant program grow and take on new shape and flourish. Together, we were the points of contact for establishing a mutually respectful and cooperative relationship that lives on in those organizations. Little did I know in 1995, as a young 30-something artist and curator, how important Jeremy would be in my life as I grew into my work at First Peoples. Although I didn't recognize it at first, he became a generous mentor to me as I learned how to effectively navigate bureaucracy without sacrificing my beliefs and values, and he supported me becoming a better writer, a communicator, and a communicator in service of persuasion and negotiation. During those 14 years, we had some tough conversations, but I always felt like his equal. If I ever called, or later, when we had emailed Jeremy with a question or an idea, he always responded. And even though when he became extremely busy with all his responsibilities, the Indigenous Arts program always remained a priority for him. So Jeremy is part of my story too. It was only when I found myself mentoring other administrators, artists, and curators that I saw what a generous act it is to give to another person in that way. I see some of his other dear colleagues from BC Arts Council here, and I know that many of them also consider him an important mentor in their lives. And I'm also sure they would attest that his mentorship was subtle and without ego and formality. Jeremy was more than an ally to the work of Indigenous artists, organizations, and communities. He was a thoughtful accomplice who worked to help clear a trail from the other direction, and we met in the middle. The Indigenous artists and communities and organizations who've been supported by the arts programs at First Peoples have benefited from his commitment to and his legacy of building support for Indigenous arts. This aspect of his good work mattered to him dearly. So I celebrate Jeremy's kindness, his generosity, intelligence, and humility in his work and his life. To Marion, Alexander, and Tristan, I say Chimigwech for sharing him with us. Nimigwechawendam, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the purity of our relationship, and I'm grateful to have walked with him in this way. Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. Kathy, thank you. And also thank you to all of our speakers and everyone who is here today. It's really amazing to see all of these faces in one room and all of the love for Jer. It's really overwhelming. And I've had a good cry, and so I hope that's over for now, and I won't, during this speech. I'm here, like all of you, because I love Jeremy Long. All of these versions of Jeremy that we have heard about today, the willful and capable young man, the wild and creative student, the intelligent and versatile theater manager, and the dedicated arts administrator. I actually didn't know any of these guys, unfortunately. Any of them. The Jeremy I know is the loving and dedicated father and husband. Honestly, I cannot recall a time, in my life where his larger-than-life presence wasn't, full front. He was constant, and he was consistent. And in my mind, in my young mind, he is this mountain of a man upon which you could climb for days, like your own personal Everest. He was the bear. He was strong, but gentle, bristling with hair, and those soft brown eyes, just like pools of chocolate. They were so beautiful. Yeah. I have this incredible sense memory of being a kid and sitting in his lap, and he's telling a story in his deep baritone voice, and I can feel it coming through me in my chest, in my bones. I can still feel it when I close my eyes, and I am gonna miss that voice so much. I'm grateful to Jeremy for many things. My introduction to the boundless world of books and imagination. My love of the wild places. He took me and my brothers into the back country of BC and showed us the beauty of a simple life. The focus on education and and intelligence and thought as the paramount quality of a man. Yeah, I'm grateful that he poured all of his genetic disposition for hairiness into Alex and not and not the other two of us brothers. And as I stand here in my smooth, hairless skin, I reminisce. He was always involved, and he coached every one of my teams, soccer, baseball, despite his almost total lack of sporting experience himself. Perhaps consequently, our teams were mediocrely successful. But whether he was packing our blue Dodge Caravan with soccer balls and sliced oranges, or catching foul balls with his face in Little League, he dedicated so much of his time, just to be with us. Of all of the incredible things that he accomplished in his life, the one that has had the most impact for me and our family is his example as a relentlessly loving husband and father. As Alex mentioned earlier, Jeremy's relationship with his own father was tumultuous and difficult. My grandfather was a hard man, a career soldier in a time of war, with all, of the wounds of spirit and emotion that come along with that. And he was hard on his family. I say this not to diminish the memory of my grandfather, but to highlight the incredible strength of character that Jeremy had to allow him to choose his own way as a father. And be the type of father that he wished he had. I feel as if, because of this, it's been easy for Alex and I to emulate that style, of loving and connected parenting. Yeah, another, amazing example, of the depth of Jeremy's dedication to, his children and family, is how much time, attention, and energy that he poured into our brother, Daniel. Daniel had a very difficult path through life, especially in his last few years. And Jeremy was there, right with him through all of it, supporting, doing everything he could. And with the loss of Dan in 2013, I feel as if, Jeremy's heart broke, at that time. And, he really took a huge piece of Jer with him when he went. And This event also coincided, with the further complication of what was already a very difficult health journey for Jeremy. Increasingly, over the years since, Jeremy has been, forced to retreat into his body, and his world has gotten smaller as a result, especially the last 6 years. And I know a lot of his friends and his colleagues have lost touch over the last 6 years, especially. And I just want to close here today with a request and a hope that we all leave here holding the memory of the best version of Jeremy that we know. The wild young man, the creative artist, the amazing father, all of the things that he's been over his lifetime. And I hope it's how every one of us is remembered when our time comes, is in our full glory and the best parts of ourselves. Jeremy, the intelligent, loving person who brought us here all today. To honor him and all of the amazing things he's done in his life. Jeremy had 3 sons, but he never had a daughter. And I would like to now invite my wife, Allison, up to say a few words about her father-in-law that she's known for 13 years. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I have had the privilege to call Jeremy my father-in-law for 13 years. And I'll never forget when Tristan, on the first summer we met, described to me on a forest walk about his father, recently retired from the BC Arts Council, a major supporter of the arts, theatre, Indigenous arts, coach, resell, champion, and of course, a devoted father to 3 sons. I thought, wow, I'm intimidated to meet him, and I hope I get to meet him. And indeed, I did, and I need not have been intimidated. His gentle presence and his deep radio host voice felt immediately accepting and kind. He was often a man of few words, but his heart was always open and never judgmental. He'd be bombarded by the family's big energy and chaos, the dogs, the kids, and stuff, and his response would always be a nod and a sweet smile on his face. Over the years, it was difficult to see Jeremy's body and his physical capacity leave him. His world became small, but it was still a beautiful one. The love and attention of Marion, their home and their whimsical garden, and the constant drop-ins from friends and family were what surrounded him. Although I could never stack the dishwasher to his liking, I will always forever cherish Jeremy's acceptance, his gentleness, his patience, and his unconditional love he had for me and our family. We love you, Jeremy, and your love is kept safe and for always in our hearts.
And now I will welcome Susie back up to have a little closing remark. Oh, wait. Yeah? Okay. Actually, sorry. I'm going to welcome Kathy Weary and her partner, Andy Paul, who are going to sing a traveling song for Jeremy.
The song, is this on? Yeah. The song that we're going to sing is an Anishinaabe traveling song. And this song is often sung to support people who have started their spirit journey, to help them on their path to the other side and to the stars. So this is a song for Jeremy. Way hey ah, way ha, way ho. Way hey ah, way ha, way ho. Way hey ah, hey ah, hey ho. Way hey ah, hey ah, hey ho. Way hey ah, way ah, way ho. Way hey ah, way ah, way ho. Way hey ah, hey ah, way ho. Way hey ah, way ah, way ho. Way hey ah, way ah, way oh. 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 Way hey ah, way ah, way oh.
On behalf of Marion and her family, thank you again very much for being here today. And thank you to everyone who shared their stories of Jeremy. What Marion especially wanted to say and to share with all of you is that she recognizes that there are a multitude of reflections in this room today held by all of you of Jeremy Long and what he meant to you and what he meant to others. And Marion wanted to encourage you to continue to shine the light on that. Thank you very much.